Hello everyone and welcome to my first YouTube video. Today I'm going to be going through how to render wood, metal and plastic with markers. I'd like to preface this and for everything on this channel that this is not the only way to do this and it might not be 100% the right or wrong way. This is just how I do it and I thought I'd share it because it might be useful to some people and because it's quite fun to do. So let's get into it. I'm starting off by just drawing some basic cylinders with an ellipse template. The reason I'm doing this is because it's easy and saves time, but of course if you want to draw them freehand then you can. I'm starting off with just a pencil as well because we can always go over it later. Got some pro markers here for the browns of the wood. You can get these from Amazon or anywhere. If you're at Loughborough, you can get them from the art shop. And I'm just going to start by drawing the outline. And I do this so that it's easier to stay within the lines. And it just keeps the sketch looking a bit cleaner as you go on. And I'm going to start with some confident line strokes and just cover the entire face of the wood. Try and keep it all in the same direction because that will then show the flow of the bark, and you can use the same marker to just saturate areas of the sketch and make them darker. There's no need to switch to another marker yet. Now I'll switch to a darker marker and we just go through it with those same areas and start to add some sort of more dry strokes of the marker. Simulate the roughness of the bark. And really just helps sort of make a realistic texture, and you can start adding sort of lines and random shapes in the bark if you want to just make it a bit more realistic. That's completely down to you. I'll then use a lighter one on top to portray the rings of the bark, the wood, sorry, and then a slightly darker marker again to just set it off and match it to the sides. I'll then just use a fine line pen to go around the edges. This just sets it off from the background and helps to define the sketch on the page. Again, just using an ellipse template because it's easy, but you can freehand it, of course. Then use a black watercolor pencil. These are really handy because you can start to sort of shade on some more roughness and texture of the bark. And this really helps it become more realistic. You can just lightly do that. Unfortunately, the video crashed here and I only found it out when I was editing it, so I'm sorry. Yep, so it crashed, but all I did was add some brown pencil and draw on some of the rings on the inside of the wood, so you can replicate that. I'm now going to move on to soft matte plastic. I'm using red Copic markers for this. You can use any brand of markers, doesn't matter, but these are the reds that I've got. Again, I'm just tracing around the outline to stay within the lines, just makes it a bit more easier when I'm sketching. And you want to get the same coverage as you did with the brown markers. Literally just go all the way around the face of the cylinder, getting a nice even coverage with the same direction going downwards. And you can use the same marker again to just saturate different areas, just to give the shape a bit more realism, basically. There's no need to switch to a darker marker, not yet. And then you can fill in the top face as well. You can see that I'm doing this at a slight angle, almost to make it look like in perspective or isometric in this case. That again just adds to the realism. If you keep all the lines going in the same direction, it helps define the faces. So I'm just going to outline it again, set it off from the page. And I'm going to go in with a white pencil here, again a white watercolour pencil, and just go around the front face, front edge here, sorry, to define it. I didn't use a black pen on this, so that basically you can use that white line to define that front edge, and it looks quite nice because it looks like a really soft, really small fillet on this plastic cylinder. And then you can use the white pencil again just to give it a bit more texture and make it look a bit more realistic. You can add some shading in some areas, and I like to add some little stipples or white dots. That just replicates where it's come out of an injection mold tool, or there's a little bit of wear, or there are really subtle highlights in the texture of the plastic, and it just adds to the realism really. And I think that's pretty good. It's pretty much how I want it to be. And yeah, you can see how that just differs to the wood texture. The next one is metal. This is probably the hardest one to do. I've got a full set of cool greys for this. Well, some of the mid-tones. And you can use any brand again. Your Pro markers or Motica markers will work just fine for this. I'm starting with a light grey marker, and with this metal texture, you really need to have good line confidence. Nice quick lines, because that will really define the shadows and highlights on this sort of stainless steel chrome type material that we're going for. So you can see I've left some areas empty, and as I move on to the cool grey 4, really just trying to get sharp, crisp lines going all the way down and across the top again, just to add more realism with the direction of the faces. At this point, I'm not really being too precious about going over the edges because we'll clean that up later, but I'm moving on to a darker marker now to start setting those dark highlights or shadows. Just keeping it nice and controlled, nice and sharp. If you are worried about going over the edges, you can use masking tape as well to keep it really clean. But it's good to practice like this. If you're not really sure about where to set your highlights as well, it might be worth just making a cylinder on Keyshot and adding a light source and just seeing where those reflections hit, and you can use that to mimic that in your sketches. It's a bit of a longer way around it, but if you are really stuck, then that's definitely a way to do it. And you can use the sort of fine tip of a marker as well for a bit more precision when you're creating those highlights there. And again, just using the black pen to define the shape on the page. And I'm just sharpening the white pencil to get it really nice and sharp for this, because we want it to be quite crisp. Just highlighting that front edge again and paying close attention to where the light would hit it, just to define it and give it a bit more contrast. And you can use this pencil again to just sharpen up those dark shadows, just some lines like this. and lightly shade it on there just to, you know, add to it. Works really well on this Strathmore tan paper. Of course, you can keep adding to it as you go. I would say try not to overwork marker sketches. Sometimes they look better when they're simple, and if you overwork them or go too far, then it can just make them look messy. Yeah, that's it for all three of these textures. You can see how they differ there. I'm going to do another video soon where I start to apply these textures to actual products, but give this a practice and see how you get on with it, and once you understand the principles, then you can start to do that for yourself and apply them to products that you want to sketch, or your own products as well. I always add this sort of rectangle in the back just to give the page a bit more depth and make it more of like a piece. But there you go, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you thought and what you want to see next. Obviously, go follow me on Instagram and all that. Thank you.